Greetings, sufferers. Welcome to episode 3 of Bits and Chunks here at the Cinematic Suffering Podcast. Tonight we have a very special guest. He's a master of technology, a writer and a musician in bands like Rise from Fire and Deserts of Mars. He's written for graphic novels like SciComm and Clockworks. He's worked in the exciting, high-pressure world of video games, and he's a contributor to the Castle of Horror podcast. He's a lover of horror films and all things genre. It's my good friend, Tony Salvaggio. Tony, I'm thrilled to have you on the podcast, and I really appreciate you coming on.
Oh man, it's awesome. It's great to kind of be back in touch. Also, with all of that, it sounds so much like cooler than the fact I was just playing Final Fantasy from like the Final Fantasy V and listening to metal, which is also different than college. Right. Which I think Final Fantasy V is from around that time. So basically, that sounds all cool, but I don't think as much has changed as I would like, maybe.
Yeah, I say it all the time. The only thing that's changed for me notably is just the aching bones and the slow progression of death,
Sure.
the decay
yes.
of life.
Yeah.
It's a big change, but I appreciate you coming on, man. We at the time that we get this uploaded and that people actually see it, my normal co-host and good friend Jason is going to be in England seeing Iron Maiden for three shows. He's going to 3 shows.
Oh man, that's
Iron
awesome.
Maiden. Yeah. So
there's an Iron Maiden tribute band. Oh, sorry to interrupt, but there's an Iron Maiden tribute band playing tonight.
Are you
Austin,
going?
So, no, I don't think I'll be able to, but it bums me out because I just found out that some people I know are in it. I'm like, oh man, so I don't know if I'll be able to go, but it's just funny. That's very coincidental.
Yeah, it's I bet they're a lot of fun. Have you ever seen them before?
No, this is like this particular one. I've seen another tribute band here in town, but this particular one, I think, reformed for one night, which makes it even worse that I'm not out there. So, oh wow, that's the perils of adult life. You don't always get to choose what you want to do.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. And for me, I'm not sure what it's like for you. Like, I have to go into Atlanta to see any good shows here. I live in the suburbs, ironically, to be closer to work. And I probably told you this, but we signed the paperwork, and then 5 seconds later, COVID happened, and it was like, now being close to work is kind of irrelevant. It still worked out. I'm glad we did it, but yeah, that was a shitty time.
Yeah, there's a lot. There's a lot. When I think at the time I was working for Rooster Teeth and had to transition our whole studio of, few hundred people to working from home. So that was interesting for me, though. For as about your question, though, for me, we live in the suburbs, but I'm lucky enough that it's really about 30 minutes tops to go to a show at all the places I want to go to a show. Like if I want to go to San Antonio, it's going to be, a little while, or Houston or Dallas. But
I got
as far as we get a lot of local really good bands. And so I'm lucky that all the clubs I kind of want to go to more or less top end, anywhere from 15 to 30 minutes. So it's kind of an embarrassment of riches as far as that goes in Austin.
Oh yeah, that's good. That's good. And I've heard it's a pretty cool town as far as like, entertainment and the arts and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. I mean, I like it. It's changed, and there's plenty of people who are like, it's not the same, and it's not. But it's also, there's still really, really good clubs. I mean, I just saw, since we're, both metalheads from long back, I saw Savage Master recently.
Oh, cool.
A local band called Mean Mistreater played, which they're amazing.
I love their name.
Hearts. Yeah, they're great. Crossed Hearts, which actually was a really good band as well. And then before that, I saw locals Destroyer of Light and Red Mesa, who are run their own Desert Records label. And so it's on any given night you can see a lot of music, so that's cool. Yes, stuff closes and things change, but I've been happy that, I do miss, like, us going way back. I do miss kind of having, as the older you get, the less of a kind of a crew you have.
Oh,
So I
tell me
do I
about it.
do miss, like, whenever we would kind of just, hey, we're all going to that shit to a show uh in Savannah. That was kind of nice. But luckily, I'm in enough bands that you kind of see all your friends who are all the metalheads, and stoner rock guys
Yeah.
and chicks at the same, you know, same
Yeah,
shows.
I kind of experienced the same thing because I've gotten somewhat friendly with, excuse me, several of the musicians in town. I just, you know how it is, artists kind of, you know, magnetized to one another. I've just kind of made friends with
Absolutely.
some of them. So and that's a lot of fun because I hate going to shows by myself. I feel awkward. I just, I just don't like it. I feel like I need to have somebody to talk to in between bands and stuff. So it's good to go there and actually have a
Hmm.
community there that's into it. And this, like the stoner doom rock community, they're a tight knit bunch, and they're very welcoming if you're into it.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of pretension when it comes to that kind of music. It kind of is what it is. It's honest. We're all old and craggy and gross and ugly. So
Well, also, by the way, like, anytime I encounter pretension in any kind of, like, we're super serious, like, you should be serious about your craft, right? Like,
right,
play a
right.
good show, be a professional. But anytime I encounter pretension among peers it's like, look, man, you're singing about, like, weed and dragons and
And
space
dragon smoking
stuff
weed.
and desert space people and fantasy, like, if you have pretension about that, like, are you really in the right place? How are
I,
you
I
spending your time?
I'm amazed by that kind of shit too. Like it's I noticed it. I haven't noticed it at the last couple times I've seen them, but like there was a couple of Gwar shows that I went to where it was I was amazed at how like so many people in the crowd didn't seem to be in on the joke. Like you realize this is
Oh
the
my
silliest
goodness.
shit ever,
I
and
can't
and you know
believe
me,
that.
I'm the biggest Gwar ever. But I mean,
Sure.
like there was this one dude that was mean mugging everybody, and he had like Ronald McDonald, no shit, like Ronald McDonald hair, the color and the texture, and he was wearing really short shorts, like like short shorts, Daisy Dukes and stuff, and he was fat as hell, and I mean, and I'm not, believe me, I'm not
Yeah.
body shaming anybody or any of that kind of shit, but it's like, dude, you put that on, you saw what you look like, and and we're about to see the silliest shit that's imaginable,
W-
and you're sitting there trying to look all tough and stuff. Like you got to pick a thing.
was he covered in, like, guar goo?
No, he
Oh,
wasn't.
because see, that would be the ultimate. If you're, like, me mugging people, but then you're, like, covered with guarness, that I
Yeah,
think would be the ultimate. I would just I that's the kind of
yeah.
stuff that makes me really laugh, because it's so, like, you should, like, I'm serious about even the sci-fi stuff I'm singing about, right?
Yeah.
But also, not not being able to take it back a little bit and just being too serious about yourself, like, you miss out
Well,
on so much fun in life, I think.
I totally agree, man. I think it's I think it's a good way to go through life, and it's the same kind of thing as, like, we've talked about this before. Kind of looking back and thinking about people that you allowed kind of in your circle, and allowing them to get into your head, and kind of allowing that kind
Yeah.
of negativity to you realize just how many opportunities you missed for fun by just kind of being that way, being too serious, being just shitty and negative or whatever it is, It's
And that's also, like, this your podcast is, primarily horror, and it's the same thing. Like,
yeah,
there's people who take horror super seriously, and again, you should take the craft seriously, and there is some stuff that's really serious, and it's dealing with, like, a lot of really serious topics. But
right.
also, like, if you look at the expanse of the horror genre, if you really enjoy it, you got to kind of be along for the ride to be not as serious. Like I can watch The Exorcist and I can watch Critters and Critters 2. And they each have a different level, but also like that and also that kind of, horror and metal crossover that happens a lot. It happened a lot during the 80s. Like all of that stuff kind of intermingles and people who take themselves way too seriously about that. It's just like, what's wrong with having fun? Like that's how I always operate. And I'm always amazed when people don't quite have that same tact. Like realize what we're enjoying, right?
Right.
So
it's
bizarre.
Well, and it's funny that you mentioned kind of the cross pollination of metal and horror movies, because in a lot of ways it's the same audience. They're just
exactly
like they're just as opinionated. They're just as like, how many times have you had this, like the exact same conversation about a band as you did a horror movie, where it's like, did you see this new band / horror movie? It was really cool. I kind of liked it. That sucked. That was dog shit. Like people are just that cut and dry with their opinions about it. They're just as visceral kind of hate about it. Me and Jason, like our philosophy when we go into this is like, we're horror fans and we're creative. So even if we're kind of crapping on people's movies, we always try to do it with the caveat that we respect these people as artists and we're not trying to hurt anybody's feelings. And we understand that it's got to be incredibly difficult to make an effective horror movie. It's probably, it's probably like making a good comedy. Like it's really hard to scare people. It's really hard to make people laugh. And it's really hard to keep people entertained consistently for the runtime of a whole movie. That's like a lot of times you probably don't even know if you're dealing with a master work or a piece of crap until you edit it.
Well, on that same note, like for me, it's also a small industry and I work like in that. So I try not to do that. In fact, I've been on not to make this as a plug, but I've been on Jim Towns, our friend Jim's podcast, cool. Borgo Pass. He has one about Universal Horror. And some of those guys started calling me the Duke of Positivity, because I really hate, like, it's hard to make a movie. It's hard to make anything artistic. It's hard to make an album. It's hard to make a movie. And so I really try. Look, there's tons of stuff I dislike, but I really try, if we're going to do it like on our podcast, to find the good in it and to really, I don't mean be disingenuous, like,
no, I hear you.
It's super hard to make anything worth a damn. And it's harder all the time. And so I really try to approach it. And, you won't see me posting like F this, like on the internet, because that could be somebody I know, because I work in, I do stuff in film from time to time and everything like that. And it is hard. Like even like you mentioned Clockworks, like that's a good example for whatever reason, that book took over a decade to get into the US. That's not normal for comics. Like all kinds of stuff. And then our editor that we got, which was our 5th or 6th editor on that book, ended up rewriting huge chunks of it without, like, I knew there was going to be some changes, but I didn't realize the extent of it. And boy, was that a bitter pill when I realized what he changed. Now, the artwork is beautiful, and I still think it's a strong book, but it's not the book I'd originally written. And that stuff happens all the time. There's that's analogous to what happens in Hollywood. I've had friends who were, there was it's a pretty famous one where they were, the storyline was about a guy with cancer and his friends are trying to, get him to a movie, and the executives were like, man, cancer, that's a real bummer. Could he just be like kind of sick? Like, no, the whole idea is that he has cancer and he needs to do that. That's the thrust of why they're trying so hard for him. If he just had a cold or flu, It's
Yeah,
not, that's not the same. And so all that stuff, man, to making anything and getting, especially if it's the more people you get involved and the bigger the funding, the more hands are in it. And
yeah.
and that's why,
Well,
like, a lot of the
definitely.
horror we enjoy, like a lot of the weird, just gonzo stuff was some of the best, because
No one's
the
fucking
people
with it.
funding it were just like, yeah, go make that thing. And then you come
Yeah.
out, and sometimes it's good, sometimes it's not as great, but that passion to just make something is really,
Oh,
uh that's where it's at for me.
definitely. And you hit on something that I constantly feel, and that I say more and more as we do this podcast as it grows, is that like that all these big screen like Marvel movies. I've always been kind of so interested in them anyway. I've obviously, as a cartoonist and a creative, I've seen all the big ones, and I've seen a lot of the Marvel movies, but I just can't. I never could get all that excited about them, and especially in the last decade or so, they've just waning interest in that. But with horror movies, even if it's a bad one, you can tell that there was so much heart, and like you pointed out, just a kind of a lack of that editorial control that they have over it. It's a lot purer piece, like and I'm sure we enjoy a lot of the same movies, like something like Psycho Gorman, like that couldn't
Oh yeah,
exist in
I
the.
know some of those guys, and
Oh, I'm sure.
they are genuine, like, we want to make this. I Some of their other stuff was even, I liked even better than that movie. But
Like the
the
Astron
fact that they
6.
decided, what? No, go ahead.
Like the Astron 6, do you mean? Or
Yeah,
some of
yeah,
their
yeah, yeah.
other.
Like,
Yeah.
the fact that they just decided to make Power Ranger villain costumes. Like, I kind of wanted that movie to be almost more Power Rangers in
Yeah.
some ways.
Yeah.
And not that I dislike what they made, but all of that stuff, like, who does that, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and it's
Um,
definitely a passion project, because you look at the behind the scenes, and there's the director who's comes from a special effects background, but there's the director like airbrushing all these practical
yeah.
effects and stuff, and just a real has a real love for that kind of stuff. I think one of the first things that I can't remember the order that I've seen his work in, and I'm blanking on his name. He's I'll think of it later, look at it. But I'm a big fan of his work, and I loved all the Astron 6 stuff. But some of the first stuff that I saw him direct was that video for the Cybertronic Spree. I saw that, and I was just
Oh yeah,
scratching my
yeah.
head, but also like smiling ear to ear, like this. I love it when I find that kind of wacky, just weird stuff like that. It's kind of it's a fun find, because I don't know. Everything else is so polished and overthought in the mainstream.
And also there's stuff kind of in that same field of, like a Turbo Kid, where
Yeah,
the gore is just. But what I love about Turbo Kid and stuff, I like also what I like about what they're doing is it's not ironic. We've kind of
yeah,
grown into this irony state where, and look, if people enjoy something, I'll be honest, like I've said it on our podcast a lot, but like, I don't like the term guilty pleasure, because I really have gotten, like, once I'm an adult and I don't have the kind of the peer pressure of high school anymore, or even
yeah,
college, but I realize, I shouldn't have had that peer pressure, because whatever, how many of those people do you see again? I have to worry about. But either way,
yeah,
like, I don't. I feel I have two caveats. Are you hurting yourself or others? So, like, if there's a director who's hurting people and doing really bad stuff, I have a
yeah,
hard time supporting them. But or people involved. But if it's not hurting yourself or other people, like, enjoy whatever you like. Life's so short, and we've learned that
yeah,
even more lately. And so I like what I like about their stuff is it's not ironic. Like, even Turbo Kid takes all the stuff we dug and uh isn't it doesn't point it out. It's not, because too often it's like, hey, that's a reference, right? Wink. And it's kind of this wink at the
Oh, I hate
camera.
that. Yeah, I hate
And
it.
they
Takes
don't
you right
really
out of the
do that.
movie.
Yeah,
No,
they don't
no,
really.
it's
and I love that kind of stuff. I love that there's people out there making things that are not ironic or supposed to, like, you're supposed to instantly grasp. Because I also like that it kind of makes you dig a little bit if you weren't maybe steeped in that like we were. That if
Yeah.
you want, and but it doesn't force you. So it doesn't say like, hey, you gotta, you know, like the Marvel movies where some people do feel like they have to see like two miniseries and something else or whatever. But like you watch
Yeah.
something like Turbo Kid or Psycho Goreman or whatever, if you know about where those practical effects come from and what the references are, and weird Power Rangers stuff, and it enhances your viewing,
Yeah.
but you don't have to watch that to also enjoy it. And I think that's some of the
Yeah.
best stuff.
Oh, I do too, and it's one of the many things I like about Turbo Kid is I love that movie. It's just
It's done so
like
well.
I totally agree with everything you said, and it's just everything about Turbo Kid it's like it's full of this gore, but you just have to laugh at it. I mean, movies
Well,
like
it's in the same vein as Gore, right? Like that
oh
over the
yeah,
top. Like I can't take this. If you take that seriously, you're missing kind of the joy of it.
yeah, you're mentally ill if you take it seriously.
I mean, now granted, some people think we're mentally ill for watching it, so
True,
you know.
true. That they don't understand they don't understand the catharsis from it, and
Sure.
I always resented that so much, that judgmental kind of thing. And it's I know I'm bouncing around. You said a lot of stuff that I'm just like yes, yes, yes. Like now that kind of quote unquote geek culture has kind of entered the mainstream, and the one thing that I do like about it is that that judgmental thing is not there. Like what you said was dead on about we're adults now, so who cares what the jocks think? All those guys have the same type 2 diabetes that I'm trying not to get, and the same plantar
Right.
fasciitis. So we're all kind of on an even keel now. But in some odd circumstances, it's almost like it's an identity. It's become this. It's gone kind of almost the opposite direction to where people could you get the idea sometimes that people say that they're into geek stuff, but they're trying to find some kind of identity. Like
Sure.
it's not, and it's not like I
Well,
question people, but it's like you're not really into this stuff because you don't get any of my references.
look, I don't I issue gatekeeper culture in
Oh, I
general
hate it
too. And
too.
I because my approach, again, this is not for everybody. Purely, when I say these things, I'm purely talking about myself. My approach is always, you can say like, "Oh, you don't know such and such, will name blah," right?
You're right.
Or you can go, "Oh, if you're at this show, right? Metal show, or you're at this movie, if you like this thing, obviously you've shown up and paid your cash, right?" So
Yeah.
there's that the older you get, the harder that is to separate yourself from cash and time to get to a place. So
Yeah.
if you're there, then instead you could go, "Hey, I think you would like X, Y, and Z
Yeah.
as well," and throw those seeds out there, because that's how you get more cool people. And if they don't want to listen to it or watch it, whatever, like I go home and, okay, I still have all those DVDs and like streaming, and like I can watch that, and that didn't affect me. But how much
Yeah.
cooler instead of just, because like when I was getting into metal and punk, if I had met people who were that way, I would have not been into that. Like,
Well,
oh,
and
you haven't seen The Exorcist, right? Like if it's horror, like you aren't even
yeah.
like, I probably would have been like, wow, what a jerk. I'll go watch something else. So you have those choices that you can make.
Yeah.
And for some people, I get that there's a little bit of kind of gatekeeping keeps a little bit of cohesion. uh, But I don't know. Again, like the older I get, the less I care about that either.
Oh,
Because I don't have to
precisely.
fight for my right. And I've already fought that fight, I guess.
Well, yeah, it's I
I
mean
feel like I have.
well, I mean, like we, just a bit of backstory. Like Tony and I were friends back in art school. We went to Savannah College of Art and Design together, and I'm sure that that the tone has changed dramatically since uh,
Hmm.
we went there. But like I was amazed. Like, not only was there a lot of people just within the town that resented us for baffling reasons, like, oh, I'm so sorry that we're bringing all this culture and money into your into your town, but also there was just this like competitive petty infighting with a lot of our peers too. So a lot of
Yeah.
times it kind of felt like it was good to find your
Well,
kind of your circle, but and then even that could break down because there's people shit talking even within that. So humans are
yeah.
an odd bunch, and
Well,
like you brought
kind of.
up, man, I less tolerance for it the older I get.
Well, it's funny too because I have a pretty decent story. I don't know what your audience is, so hopefully my ramblings will be fine. So, but
At the moment,
when you
it's
talk
about.
about
Go ahead though. It's whatever you want.
finding your tribe, we did find our tribe, and our tribe was metalheads who also dug horror, right? For the most part,
Right.
that
Precisely.
tended, and that crossover was really 80s and 90s, especially, I think, because I think it still continues, but that really was, you got a lot of bands, especially early death metal, kind of really played into that with the cut with
Definitely.
and a lot of metal. I mean, you had Anthrax singing constantly about Stephen King novels, right? Like
Yeah.
that
Judge
all that
Dredd.
stuff was
Yeah.
crossover. But
Yeah.
what was amusing to me, because I grew up in a tiny, I mean, really seriously tiny town, in the middle of
In
nowhere.
Mississippi, right?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I'm from Texas, but my family, my stepdad was from Mississippi. I lived in Mississippi because that's where we moved. Tried to get back out to Texas as much as possible. But you know, and that's where I live now. But the whole thing that surprised me was being not exactly outcast. I think that's too broad of a term, but we weren't the skaters, and we weren't the hippies, and we weren't the kind of more uptight. Architecture students tend to be a little, and graphic designers tend to be a little bit more uptight and more slick, you know.
Yeah.
But what's amazing about this kind of conversation is years later, because we were just the detritus, the leftovers of all these. We were the shake of all of these uh, different groups, and we just found our
Yeah.
tribe, and it was enjoyable. Like, we like
Yeah.
comics, and we hung out. But what I found out later was, I was talking to a friend, time a couple years removed from hanging out, or maybe it was actually when I was just spending all my time in the computer lab because I was going to school for animation. But to him, because we all ate at the same kind of common table, to him, on the outcasts, because we always thought of ourselves as the outcasts of all the, we didn't fit in with any other groups. He was like, "What do you mean? You guys had like the biggest table, and it was just seemed like chaos." Like, so he thought of us as this like misanthrope chaos regime.
That's a much cooler way to say it than it probably was, but it was cool
Oh,
in
it
a
was
lot of
totally.
ways.
We were all just like, I don't know why we don't fit in, but I guess let's go play some more TurboGrafx and Mortal Kombat, and listen to you know thrash metal and Nocturnus or whatever, any kind of
Oh
doom metal
God.
that was out. And then like, and you were drawing comics, and I was in the computer lab. Like, none of that stuff was cool in the same sense, but evidently to an outsider. And this is what's fascinating about, kind of these groups, these tribes we form into, about loving horror, because to us, we're all the weirdos, right? But
Yeah.
then there's a horror convention, and all the weirdos are there. And I've seen multiple guests that been in green rooms for doing comics. Like, I'm not super famous, but I've been as a guest at different cons, and universally, a lot of the guests are like, the horror community, and in some ways some of the metal community, are some of the best people. Like, I have the most fun at those conventions. um
They
there's
get it.
always
They get
outliers,
it.
but it's, in general, that seems to be kind of like, yeah, I love to come here, and they treat me well, and it's this whole kind of thing. And that's, it's funny because even though it's more mainstream, like, there's still kind of that, oh, we're the outcast, even though that's kind of not
Yeah.
really true. Like, I mean, there's whole Dungeons and Dragons Dungeons and Dragons used to be satanic panic, like pariah
yeah.
stuff, right? And now there's like really, really, really famous Dungeons and Dragons groups, and who are way more attractive than any of us were.
I know.
We were playing.
I know. I mean, it's like, it's weird, man. It's kind of surreal to think of the term geek. It literally doesn't mean what it used to. It used to be a total pejorative term. It was not, no one self-diagnosed themselves as a geek.
It kind of comes from like people in, anime circles, which I still watch tons. Originally like otaku in Japan was like shut in, basement dwelling, horrible, smelly person. Like that was the,
like
the
that's
gist
literally
of the term was shut in, if I remember correctly, or like, so, had all of that connotation,
social leper.
And so people, but now it's like you could say that, and kind of it's like the same way geek is now, hey, or that I'm a movie geek, like, that's okay. And I prefer, look, I mean, in a lot of ways there are people who took that and ran with it, so that some of the upper tier geekdoms have become the geek version of the jocks that shoved us in the lockers, and that's a shame, and that really bugs me. But I would rather have a world where people can enjoy things in a more mainstream way and pick and choose what you like. Play D&D or don't. Watch Doctor Who. Doctor Who was like, wait, that's on PBS? Nerd.
Yeah.
And so but it's hugely popular, and I don't have that. Man, it used to be cooler. I'm like, that's cool that people can enjoy things. Like, why let's just let people enjoy things. That's pretty great, man. The fact that we have our horror movie podcast that people listen to is also like, wow, let's all enjoy these things together. That's pretty amazing.
It really is. And it's I mean, like right now, it's given us a way to, kind of reconnect and talk about this kind of stuff, and maybe share it with an audience. In our case, it's a small one, but we're still starting out. But honestly, I don't really, I don't want to say I don't care, but I'm enjoying it just as much, regardless of how many clicks and likes and all that stuff we get. So
for Castle of Horror, our whole thing was just we were started to get scattered as we took different jobs and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And so it was a way for us to reconnect. We all liked horror, except for my friend Jason's wife, Julia. At first, we were just like, hey, well, 3 more white dudes doing a podcast. Is that going to be compelling? Maybe not. Can you also hang out with us a lot? We were good friends. Would you like to be the color commentary and add a different perspective as a non-horror, hardcore horror person?
Right.
And that ended up being really cool. The thing we get the most comments about is, we've been pretty low key as far as our production value is not as slick, especially in the early days. Like sometimes I'd have to dial in on my phone because of, I was in a studio all night or whatever.
Right.
So it started out, the people who have enjoyed our podcast have said, well, what I like about it is it sounds like friends of mine hanging out after we were watching a movie.
Exactly.
And that's really what it was supposed to be. It's not scholarly. Like, I love scholarly stuff. It's not as scholarly. We try to bring, I try to bring what knowledge into it because we are passionate about these things. Yeah. But that's really why we started, was just, hey, let's hang out. And, we've done over 400 episodes now, and that's
amazing.
That's cool for us. It works for us. And there's a lot of things we could do to probably be more professional or more, slick and really sell more ads and all that stuff. But that was never the intent of what we do. And that's kind of, it's nice to always not have to monetize. Like, yes, it would be awesome if I made a salary off of that, but it's also kind of nice to not have to monetize every single artistic aspect of what you do. I mean, I already have to worry about it. Look, I love playing in my bands, but I'm the person doing all of that. So it's nice to have something kind of pure, that you just do. You hang out with your friends and do that, and I get, and that's
Absolutely.
kind of, and that sounds more or less that's why you guys started too, right? Like,
Pretty much, yeah. I mean, we both needed, kind of some form of artistic expression. I mean, it was
mhm,
we started doing the podcast as a audio only, and the premise back then was, excuse me, it was a horror on Netflix A to Z. Like, we're just gonna watch
mhm,
every horror movie on Netflix from A to Z, and we're gonna review them. And it became tedious, and it became kind of like homework. And then, there were some personal tragedies on my side that kind of ended it. And
gotcha.
and then when like similar things kind of happened to Jason later on, and he was looking for something. I think that I never really asked him specifically why, but I the band thing, he just wasn't feeling that anymore. He wanted to do something different, and he reached out to me and asked if I wanted to get the Cinematic Suffering podcast back together, and I couldn't say yes quick enough. Like, I was just
Right.
so it came in at just the right time. So the reason that we're doing this is just because we love horror. We love there's a big MST3K influence with what we do. We wear that on our sleeves. It's obvious with a lot of our content that, okay, that's what they're doing, is that they're trying to provide commentary for the movie, but we also do playthroughs of horror video games and that kind of thing. And it's going to evolve as it goes. We might kind of narrow that down a little bit so that's a little more focused, but
Mhm,
right now we're just kind of horror movies, horror video games, commentary, and just making it fun. And there's a big aspect that's like what you were talking about with your podcast is just dudes in the room, busting on the movie in a good natured way. Like I said, we never try to be mean spirited about it, but
sure. Yeah, we I like that too. And I like bringing in, and everybody on our, since it's four of us, my friend Drew, who does the comic book Halloween Man, uh,
oh,
which
cool.
he, he brings his own. We all have our different things that we dig. So we all, when we're talking about what movies to do, because, it's kind of interesting that you talk about how, it started as Netflix A to Z. For us, it's kind of what we all bring to the table and then kind of vote on it. But vote is probably even more rigid than what actually happens. And then we kind of agree. Recently, our before we're taking a break right now, but recently we did all of the Scream movies. That was a whole, like, let's do that as a retrospective. So we'll do retrospectives, but then also, I tend to be the more like Asian horror kind of person or metal and horror kind of person. Jason loves Eurotrash. Drew is the biggest Friday the 13th fan. He's
Cool.
got Jason tattoos, and just
Nice.
he has a really expansive knowledge of horror as well. It's more than just that. So we all kind of bring in. Julia likes more kind of thrillers, or like if it's too gross, she's not about that. So we all kind of play to our strengths and bring stuff to the
Cool.
table. And that's made it really interesting and fascinating. Um, in that, but those kind of rules. Also, people always ask like, "What movie are you doing next?" or whatever. They tend to think
Yeah.
it's way it's way behind the scenes. It's not nearly as slick as all that. It'll be like
Yeah.
us in a Facebook chat going, "What about this?" Well, I've seen this recently.
Yeah.
Although I am kind of sad, to be honest, that we're on break right now, because I just Chattanooga Film Festival. Again, this isn't a plug, but it is because it's something I'm
Plug
enjoying.
away,
Has
dude.
has been virtual for the past since lockdown. They
And
pivoted.
is that's Fantastic Fest, right?
Oh, no, this is Chattanooga Film Festival.
Oh, okay. That's I gotcha. Gotcha.
And so they've done a virtual thing, and I just logged on to that. So I just watched like a documentary about Stephen King movies. And then they
Cool.
had like a real trashy Skinamax movie last night called
Nice.
Session. And then I was watching also a documentary that's close to home because, you know, we grew up in the height of the Satanic Panic.
Yeah.
About it's about one of the big Satanic Panic things. You know, that happened. A book called Michelle Remembers, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. And I just started. I haven't finished it, but it's called Satan Wants You. And so I usually, when I'm doing the film festivals, I'm also trying to bring people into, like, hey, here's this cool virtual fest. It kind of democratizes things. You don't have to fly to Chattanooga for the virtual part.
Yeah.
And genre film, you know, is still, like we said, we try to find our tribe. So I am kind of sad that we're taking a break. For the reason I mention it here is because there's all these cool movies that they're showing that usually I'll do recommendations and I'll try to bring light, because there's also a lot of indie filmmakers that play their movies at festivals. And I've met really good friends now, virtually, or going to Fantastic Fest that you mentioned, just hanging out and, you know, meeting some director. I'm good friends with the you know, we don't see each other all the time, the guy who made this movie called Norwegian Ninja, you know, just because we like the same stuff. Like, he's from Norway, and when we visited Norway, we hung out with him and the producer. But the whole idea was just like, hey, we like the same stuff, and we just started hanging out at the film festival. And
Cool.
You know, that's just that kind of stuff. Again, that's not name dropping. It's just like, that's what's cool about these fests and about bringing indie film, because I think some of that passion, you know, so much stuff that we picked off of the VHS shelves back in the day was just somebody who's like, you know what, I'm gonna make this. Like, you know, you don't get Deadly Spawn coming from you know, or Critters from a major studio.
No.
You know,
No,
like,
they'd laugh at it, but, you know, and the fact that these movies exist make them that much more special, because there's this feeling of, it's for us. This is for us. Like, I remember sitting down watching the Grindhouse movies, the Tarantino Rodriguez movies, and my genuine thought was like, it was nice of them to make this just for me. This can't be a money making venture that they made a film specifically for me.
Oh yeah, so often when you see something, you're just like, "Oh, how did you know? How did you know
Yeah,
that?"
I'm touched.
Thank you for this, for beaming this directly into my brain, because nobody else would possibly want this, even though we know that's not true, right? But you know, a lot of film festivals are where a lot of indie filmmakers really have to push hard and kind of get the word out. So I do enjoy that. I love when now that there can be virtual fests, that, like, we have enough streaming services, you know, the fact that we can connect, you know, this way, same idea. So I'm really enjoying when I can go to a virtual film festival. I recommend seeking those out, because you may see something that may not get distribution, or it may take a year to get distribution. Like, you never know. So that's why I like to. But it kind of reminds me of those VHS days where you would see something on the shelf.
Like some,
and now you just do it. Now we do that with Tubi, right? Like, you just go to Tubi or Amazon. Those are my two big ones where I go to find just random stuff.
Yeah.
And you'll just search through and go, what the heck? And
like,
you know, I'll go on whole rabbit holes where it starts suggesting me stuff, and I'll just go. And it feel a lot of film festivals kind of, if you can do that, especially virtual, but it's always fun to go. And, you know, now that we can, it's a little bit safer to go to in-house, you know, in-person ones. But, you know, again, virtual ones democratize that. So it has that flavor of kind of this, you know, what's, if I scratch the surface, what's behind there? And another thing I like about the, you know, Chattanooga one is they also set up Discord servers and stuff, so that you can get, if you can't be there, you can hang out with your tribe, right?
Right, like you
And
could. It's a side community that's
yeah, and I
probably
thought like
as fun as the what you're seeing on screen at times. I'm sure.
yeah, and I commend them for that. Like I said, I didn't come here to plug that, but because we're talking about like all these things that we can do now, it just reminded me because and it just started, so I'm spending my weekend probably late night, and they did something really nice this year too, which I think you would dig. Is they have midnight movies every night that are secret.
Oh yeah, cool. Like back in the
So
like at the Alamo Draft House used to do that a lot, didn't it?
yeah. So in fact,
Cool.
that obsession movie, Obsession, a taste for fear from 1988, which by the way, I thought I'd seen most erotic thriller kind of things because hey,
Yeah.
you grew up trying to sneak and watch rated R movies when you're a kid on cable.
Right. It's like all you had
Now,
growing
I mean,
up.
now you could just stream whatever, so nobody. I don't even know if I was a parent. I mean, there's no like, don't watch bad movies. Like it can
I
be on
don't
your
know how they
phone.
I don't know how they navigate that actually. It's like, I mean
I mean,
that's a whole other rabbit hole, but that seems like, oh man, like you could just see the most just degenerate filth imaginable with a button click.
yeah. So this movie Obsession, like I was it was amazing. It's this neon garish skin.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like you take all of think of every Skinamax movie you've ever seen combined with something like Looker and Runaway, and just boil it down to a syrup of Skinamax,
just
and then
just
maybe put that
the
in a
pure stuff.
spoon and boil that. It was. I mean, but I love finding just like I thought I had seen most of that, right? And finding some weird, and it's not going to be for every. I mean, horror and all the things we love. It's not going to be for
Oh
everyone. So there's
yeah.
probably a lot of people who are like, "Whoa, that is sex this way and this portrayal of this." Like it's
Yeah.
you got to go like, look, I get you, but this was '88, and we weren't
Right.
thinking
Like
about those things. And it's good to put in perspective. Like, yes, I can't. I'm not justifying these things. I'm not saying that it's
oh
enjoyable because, but again, the futuristic erotic thriller of '88 is just its own. You got to kind of look at it and go, well, in the same way that a black and white gangster movie has its own pattern, or
yeah.
movies from the '50s have a way different view of like,
Oh,
most women are secretaries or
well,
or
I mean,
prostitutes, right?
oh,
Like,
it goes on and on from that era. I mean,
okay,
just the banter, like just take your typical cabin in the woods, or like your young people getting ready to go off somewhere and get murdered by a slasher kind of movie. Just their banter through today's lens is like, holy smokes, man! You
yeah,
can't say
don't
anything like that now.
we don't do that. And again, I'm not even one of those people who laments like we can't do anything anymore. It's like, come on, give me a break. You
Come
can
on,
do whatever
that's
you want. But I also, contextually, if you can contextualize it, like you can kind of understand. Some people can, some people can't. And I'm not a person, by the way, who says, I I can't believe you can't handle this. Like you
yeah,
should again, life is too short. I choose what I put in my brain a lot more
yeah,
selectively now. So like if a horror movie is a little bit too real,
right.
I at this stage of my life, I tend to watch less perhaps like a serial killer movie. This could be a serial killer that's on the news, right? I tend to watch less of that. And if you want to watch
Yeah.
that again, well, I've kind of met some people who are kind of a little bit more creepy about serial killer stuff.
Well, and it's
That's okay,
yeah.
as long as you're not hurting yourself and others. But I also understand that, like, I'm not gonna try to. You're not cool if you don't watch this or that.
Yeah,
But I also
it's
feel
so
like the
silly.
flip side is like you do kind of have to contextualize it, and you don't have to give it a pass. But I think understanding our cinematic past is it's worth, because I think that again, there's stuff that's in each like kind of thing. Like even something like that where it's like super erotic thrillery has this like you can learn from like what that era was trying to say.
Right.
And I always find that's fascinating. And some things commercial art, and some things are just like, let's get as much naked bodies up on screen as possible.
I mean,
Like,
and if
give me like I know you know, let's
yeah,
call it
like
like
we
it
know
is.
what this is. And if there was one thing that I would kind of that I am kind of an old fart about when it comes to some of the newer movies, I do. It may not be the the best thing to admit, but I do kind of miss some of those that trashiness of some of the old
Well,
movies. It's just the nudity for the sake of nudity was kind of fun back in the
I
day.
I under I absolutely understand how things change and why maybe like let's make people feel comfortable making those movies as well. Like let's have less exploitation because there are a lot of exploitation. Like, oh no, well, you have to get nude in front of the camera to get this job. Like bad time like that. Come on, not
No, that
that
all
we can't.
when
There's
it
no way to
creeps.
justify it, but there is
Yeah.
also a lot of news and there's a lot of articles written about kind of the chasteness of movies and also the dichotomy of and you could go way deeper, like we could talk about all this stuff for a long time, is the dichotomy of why is violence okay and nudity isn't. And
Yeah.
because nudity, like, nudity is a part of life, and maybe not puritanical life, but it, and why, and that was always the weird thing about Europe is they would go, hey, yeah, we have all the sex in our films. Why do you have so much gun violence? Right?
Right,
like
right.
like
It's a
why
cultural
wait,
thing.
why in Britain like you can get slapped with a really hard R rating for like a headbutting somebody, like a headbutt was like a big deal.
It's because they'll give
But
you a Manchester kiss in a second. If over there, it's more of
I mean, but like that will get you, that in your movie will get you and then, I had to deal with that in video games. You talk about, part of my, like the German version of this game I worked on, Crusader, where I did QA. It's got, I mean, the Crusader, the game has like people caught on fire and explode,
oh.
everything explodes. A guy like a gun that can melt people. But in the German version, so that you didn't have to get a hard R video game, which meant you probably weren't going to sell that many copies. Everybody just kind of gets hit and goes, eh. It was so weird to test the German version because people just kind of fall over like you trank darted them. Whereas we're running through with gleefully setting people on fire and like melting them exploding them into pieces.
Well, it kind of makes
But
me
no
wonder
nudity,
if,
right? No
like,
nudity. Whew, that would
well,
be
how
bad.
something you saying that kind of makes me wonder how something like Wolfenstein plays in Germany. They're probably
Oh,
like,
that doesn't get to no. You don't that yeah. No, you get a
we'll take a
heavily censored.
hard pass on that.
You can read about that in particular was not probably
Just
they
no.
got like a version of like the SNES version of Wolfenstein has like most of that removed. They probably got like
It
a
does.
version of that.
Yeah, they were real
Um
uncomfortable. I recall with
well,
the
I
swap.
mean, can't blame them. And again,
No.
when I talk about these things, I think you cannot forgive or give a pass to the exploitation that happened in a lot of these, and
No, no.
we should progress to a level where like what's comfortable on screen, what's comfortable for people to film, don't be a creepy weirdo jerk, right? That's kind of where
Yeah,
but there is an interesting dichotomy, and some people are even saying like it leads to kind of worse ideas about kind of a puritanical nature, which is funny because we talked about satanic panic
hmm
kind of stuff. So kind of going back in time to that era in some ways is strange to me.
yeah,
But I don't, again, I'm just a person who enjoys this stuff. And I know we're talking and we have an audience that we're, projecting to. But again, like I'm not, if somebody's like, I am not down with sex scenes and I don't think that you should, is there something weird with you where that's something you're seeking out? I'm like, well, that's not what I'm saying, and I think everybody should have their comfort level. The same with horror. Like, I didn't look, even back in the day, we talk about like the VHS days, there was, we didn't have streaming, we didn't have Tubi. So if you wanted to get the really just off the wall stuff, you had to find the right video store. And you also, or you had there were those printed catalogs, and they would sell like metal memorabilia usually. And then some of the mid 80s, like late 90s or early 90s ones would sell like, if you want, you could buy like, I remember one zine. This wasn't everywhere, but in amongst the horror community, people were passing around these catalogs, and metal T-shirts as well, but also like crime scene photos.
Oh yeah,
and like, just like, it's so weird to think about that now, right? Like, this is where I'm old, but if you want, like, I wasn't, you had to, if you wanted to get Dead Alive for a long time, Peter Jackson. You had to order it from a catalog. But even then, I wasn't going to be someone who ordered like the Guinea Pig series. I don't know if you're familiar with that.
Right. No, I'm no.
Or like a real kind of that, which got labeled as a snuff film, even though it wasn't, but it was close enough to matter. Like
well, it's because Charlie Sheen's coked out eyeballs got on it.
Sure. I mean, the federal investigation kind of stuff. But I was not a person who, I was, I watched Toxic Avenger and lots of gory. I mean, I wasn't a huge gore hound, but also, was gleefully crazy. Again, now I'm kind of inured to where I'm like, okay, yeah, you're shocking me, whatever. But that was the way you got that stuff. But even then, I wasn't like, there was an extreme level
underground back then.
Yeah, there was an extreme level. Even I was like, nah, you know what? I think I'm okay not putting that in my brain.
And it's funny you say that, because I've made a lot of the same choices as I've gotten older. I think that, I'm sure it's like this for a lot of people, as you get older and you start to experience actual loss and actual real world kind of tragedy, and you see things that are like, wow, if just for instance, just taking care of somebody in a hospice situation, that's all the horror imagery that you're going to need for a lifetime. So anything that kind of brings that back up or goes there just isn't necessarily all that interesting for me. I'm not squeamish about it, but like, for me, there's got to be a sense of creativity and dark sense of humor for me to really like it. Like, I'm not scared of them, but I'm also not all that interested in films like a Serbian film and Guinea Pig movies and stuff like that.
I'm out for that. Like,
yeah, like it's just like, and there's a certain offset of the horror community that's the stuff they love, is the stuff that's like an endurance test to get through, and that's not really appealing for me. I want to be entertained. I want to laugh at how darkly just humorous this stuff is. It should be a catharsis where you kind of face your fears, not take on stuff that's kind of psychic garbage in my estimation.
Well, also, there are things that those movies are trying to say, and there's
especially a Serbian film. I know it's actually,
but also, it also depends on where you're at and where your mind is at, etc. Like, I mean, we all rented, even though we found out later on it was fake. Like, we all snuck and rented Faces of Death, for example.
Oh yeah, we've all seen that.
And eventually, I just was like, you know what? I kind of experienced that, and I've kind of moved on. I don't mean to like thumb my nose up or like, oh, I as a teenager I also experienced that. Like, but just as far as like, that's not where my head is at, and that's not the thing. Also, you're talking about like, I also, we both had our share of tragedy. Like,
yeah,
if you've experienced somebody in the hospital or in hospice, let me tell you, it's always been scary, but those scenes in Pet Cemetery where she's taking care of her sister will hit you in such a, like, so again, when somebody says, well, I don't enjoy this rape revenge thing because myself or a friend of mine experienced trauma, even if it wasn't as traumatic as what's in the movie. I'm not going to tell them like, what?
Get over it, pussy.
It's great.
Yeah.
Like, but it's such a good movie. Like, whoa.